it's a fun time to be part of this beautiful mess because we're all in the process of helping shape what we really want to see philanthropy advising to look like in the future. We're all in the process of helping define what it is becoming.
Hello and welcome to the Money Meets Mission podcast brought to you by AVPN Academy. Today I'm your host, Arnil Peras, Executive Director of AVPN's Insights and Academy team. In this podcast series, we learn from leaders, experts, and thought leaders to help us amplify our impact as social investment practitioners. In this episode, we dove into the growing field of philanthropy advisory, a space that's gaining momentum as more donors seek to give with greater clarity, purpose, and strategy. From navigating complex choices to aligning family values with long-term impact goals, philanthropic advisors play a quiet but critical role in shaping how giving happens behind the scenes. To help us understand this evolving profession, I spoke to Kasey Oliver, Managing Director at Geneva Global, and Dien Yuen, founder and CEO of Daylight. Together, we explored who philanthropy advisors are, what they do, and how their role is shifting globally, including what this means for Asia's rapidly growing community of donors and social investors. Our conversation builds on two important contributions to the field: Geneva Global's recent white paper with the Gates Foundation. It maps out how high net worth donors engage a constellation of advisors, and Daylight's philanthropic advising competency model, a field-informed framework setting the new standard for modern advising. What emerged was both fascinating and urgent. We are in the midst of one of the largest wealth transfers in history, trillions of dollars over the next 2 decades. Philanthropy advisors are already playing a pivotal role in guiding how that wealth translates into impact, but the sector itself is still a beautiful mess, fragmented, under-researched, and in need of more structure and training. They highlight how philanthropy advisors play in moving resources and why we may need thousands more to meet the demand. They also share personal journeys into this work, stories that reveal why empathy, listening, and cultural dexterity matter just as much as financial acumen. At its heart, this conversation is about a profession that is rapidly evolving, one that is critical in shaping how generosity is practiced across generations and geographies. Let's dive in. Let me just say, quite thrilled to have Kasey and Dien in this podcast. The three of us have worked at varying times together, and it's so good to have you both in this space today and having this conversation with you. For the benefit of our listeners, would love to hear more from you, Kasey and Dien.
I am so thrilled to be joining AVPN and Dien joining you to talk about some of this new research into philanthropy advisors. Arnil, I am a managing director at Geneva Global. We are a firm that works with ultra high net worth philanthropists, foundations, corporations, and others to help reach their philanthropic goals.
Thank you. Really appreciate being here. Dien Yuen, the CEO of Daylight, and what we do actually is just professional development training for advisors. Whether you're a wealth advisor, estate planning attorney, or philanthropic advisor, we just provide the professional development training so that you could do the work on the ground. And when we define advisors very broadly in this space, it could be a full-time or it could be part of a position, or it could be something that you just fall into but ended up doing the work.
Thanks, Kasey and Dien. These already provide kind of snippets of what we hope to take a deep dive in a minute or so. To start off, would love to hear more about this research, Kasey, on this constellation of philanthropy advisors.
So this research is really answering the question that was posed to us in 2023. And that question was, where do families get their philanthropy advice? And here's what was happening in 2023. Geneva Global was getting this question, and we were thinking, well, where are philanthropy advisors? Where are they doing their work? And at the same time, Dien and her team at Daylight were doing some research, just really mapping out what do philanthropy advisors look like in the US. Dien released a fabulous report on this, called US Philanthropic Advisors 2024. Essentially, what has happened is that there is a group of us, Deanne and myself included, who are looking across the world of philanthropy advisors and saying, well, there's not quite a lot of structure around this. There's not a lot of research that has been done necessarily. This could use a little bit more attention, essentially. And so this white paper is a result of that. It's really trying to shed some light on where families are getting their philanthropy advice and filling a gap from that standpoint.
Isn't it, I think, Kasey, along the same lines, we were looking in the space because we were seeing a tremendous wealth accumulation that was happening. And we were trying to figure out how can we shift the capital with the families very willing and very interested in this, shifting capital to the communities, but why is this not happening? So there's this market gap that was there, and we were trying to figure out what's the best intervention point. And having kind of grown up in the philanthropic advising space, started looking into figuring out what is the role of philanthropy advisor? Can we be that intervention point, and can we be the shifters?
Yeah, I think adding to that, there's fabulous new data out that gives a sense of the scale and the scope of that wealth transfer within families. And in the US alone, it's estimated at above 120 trillion over the next 20 years. And we know that trillions will be going to charities. We know that philanthropy advisors are going to be a big part of that. Some of the research that Daylight has done has shed some really great light on the role of philanthropy advisors currently. And that is, of the more than 200 philanthropy advisors that they interviewed for their recent report, the amount of money that those philanthropy advisors facilitated in terms of donations was anywhere from 250,000 to over 200 billion. And the average was about 50 million. So if philanthropy advisors right now are having a huge impact and a really critical role in helping families and individuals make decisions around their giving and facilitating that giving. As the wealth transfer grows, as the ownership of that money moves into new hands, we fully expect to see that the need for philanthropy advising is going to be increasing along with that wealth transfer.
And Kasey, just to give you some context of that, we were able to identify about 800 philanthropy advisors. But looking at the estimate of this great wealth transfer, that's not just going to happen in the US, but also in Asia and Europe as well. We estimate we need a minimum 5,000 new philanthropy advisors in the marketplace by 2030. Incredible number, incredible potential for communities, right?
It really is. So I think all of this work that's happening really to put some structure around who are these philanthropy advisors? Where are they doing their work? What are the competencies that they need to have, which I know is something that you have been working on, is really just so critically important. Because right now, and Deanne, I think that you are going to coin this term, the philanthropy advisor sector is just a beautiful mess.
And it's fragmented, but the good news is there's been so much work that's been done in this space that we can rely on. And you hear terms like, philanthropic, the advising sector is a wild west. And that's true, but there are groups, there are people like Kasey and I who are trying to pull this together and put some standards, some training. And then the report that Kasey mentioned was the first look at actually, how do philanthropy advisors get compensated? What do they look like? What do they do? What kind of services do they offer? And which, Kasey jumps into the research that you're doing right now of where do families go find these advisors?
Thanks, Kasey and Dan, for providing that texture and context. I think that's important to call out that this tremendous wealth transfer is met by this increasing demand for philanthropy advisors. Let's take a minute to go deep into philanthropy advisors, who they are, and what they do. For the general audience that's listening to this podcast, this may be opaque to them. And for the high net worth individuals who are considering this next step of giving and having professional experts and advisors giving them good pathways to move forward in their giving. So would love to hear from you, Kasey, and then Dien. And if you could sprinkle stories, would really love to hear more from you on that in terms of what philanthropy advisors are and what they do.
Maybe I can start a little bit in terms of where are people doing the work of giving philanthropy advice. One big takeaway I had when doing this research for the constellation of philanthropy advisors is that philanthropy advice is everywhere. A lot of folks might think a philanthropy advisor is just an individual, a single person maybe who is an expert in philanthropy and gives that advice. But the truth of the matter is, you can find philanthropy advisors working in lots of different kinds of organizations. And the way that we've organized it in this white paper is you might look at philanthropy first organizations. So these are organizations that are set up and their first and primary priority is philanthropy itself. These are where you're going to find the people who are their own independent advisors. They have their own company. These are where you're going to find the boutique firms, groups of philanthropy advisors working together. And these are where you're going to find the full service philanthropy firms and institutional advisors. So some of the bigger firms in the world that are doing philanthropy. You're also going to find philanthropy advice in what we would call constellation supporters. So these are different groups of organizations who are still all in the philanthropy sector, all offering different services. So that might be a philanthropic collaborative. An example would be the End Fund. Another example is Blue Meridian Partners. Those are some really big ones, but of course, philanthropic collaboratives come in all different shapes and sizes. These might be community foundations. They might be networks like NCFP or AVPN itself. They might be some sector supporting organizations. So these are organizations that might offer more than just a network. They offer information and education around certain topics. And finally, you might find philanthropy advice coming from professional services that really target and support families who are wealthy. Those might be tax attorneys, estate planners, wealth advisors, even wealth psychologists, which is an interesting group in a field in itself. They might be multifamily offices, global services or consulting firms, or banks and financial institutions. And those include donor-advised funds.
And Kasey, to add to that, we talk about anyone that's involved in the who, what, why, and how of using resources for philanthropy and social impact. And if you take that definition, then that could be all the folks that you mentioned, like the ones that working in the firms, working in the banks. And I know AVPN also has a relationship with Citi. So, I'm developing that philanthropic piece as well. But I would also say there are fundraisers, like gift planners, who are doing very deep work in this space and working with their donors. So some of them do play that role as philanthropy advisors because they are also talking about kind of legacy giving. How do we shift the money into which projects that you might want to care about? And so very broadly defined for us. And we think it's much better to be inclusive. And that way we could do the proper training for everyone instead of them saying, we opt out of this. And you talked about the competency. And one of the things that we need to do in this space is to professionalize it, right? In the US, we do have a lot more philanthropy advisors in Asia, especially in Singapore and India. There are new firms being developed in the space, which is, for me, wonderful to see. I did this work about 20, 25 years ago, and it felt so lonely. But now I'm seeing colleagues who are creating firms. So what the problem, I think, in this space is we see a lot of solo entrepreneurs We see a lot of the bigger firms and also consulting firms who are turning themselves into philanthropic advising firms. We're missing the middle market space. And so we need to figure out how to build out this whole marketplace so we could serve the families who are also on a spectrum of wealth and needs.
I think it's a really great point that you raised, Dien, that some philanthropy advice is coming through fundraisers for specific organizations. For example, a university that might be working, with an alum who has been giving to that university for some time is having a conversation about bequests, for example, to that university. I think it goes to show that the kind of research we're doing and information gathering we're doing has a ways to go. So we just released this white paper, and certainly we do not expect that this is going to be the last time that we're going to be having this conversation about where do people get philanthropy advice. I think it's going to look very different in different geographies. And you've just raised, even in the US, which this paper focused on, a place that will need to go back and say, oh, you know what? That's a good point. Like, let's make sure that we include that in there next time and take a look at that. Looking outside of the US, there is one group who has done something similar in trying to map out where do families get their philanthropy advice, and that is a collaboration between DASRA and P150, who has also released a white paper around what does the philanthropy advice kind of sector look like specifically in India, to give some context to that geography. My expectation is, and I think Dan, we're aligned in this, is that the geography matters when it comes to how people are getting philanthropy advice. And it's going to look different in different locations. And that's going to be in part cultural. It's going to be in part because of how the regulations and systems are set up, the financial systems, the regulation around charitable giving, or whatever the equivalent is going to be. And because that's just how the world works.
And Kasey, also, one of the things that we also have to be mindful are lessons learned, right? So back in the day when India developed this new CSR law,
Mhm.
people were not ready for this, right? So all of a sudden, you had people who were working in the corporate sector being, appointed the CSR manager of this large company, but they didn't have the proper training. So that caused a lot of confusion and chaos in the sector. So we want to avoid that. Not that there's any new regulations coming down soon, but we want to actually be ahead of this. So how can we properly train people to do this work? And you're right, the cultural piece is so, so important. I would say in the Asia context, especially in China and other places where there's been long, like multi-generational and legacies and carrying out their family businesses, it's the philanthropy advisor, the trusted advisor, might not be the private banker. It might not be the philanthropy advisor, but it might be the gentleman who's been sitting next to the patriarch, right, helping manage that business. He can be that philanthropy advisor as well. So I think in just looking at the global context of trying to be very inclusive about who we call a philanthropy advisor, and then how we train them to do this work. So they don't have to know everything. I think that's the beauty of our work is we can rely on bringing others to the table to supplement what we don't know. So we might be really good at the relationship and family dynamics conversations, but we might not know everything about which organizations are great on the ground. So we could bring in partners to do this work. But everyone can be called a philanthropy advisor in this space.
Thanks, Kasey and Dien, and love these snippets of examples. Would love to take on a personal angle to this, asking you how you got into philanthropy advising. And I know you've expanded your services to include different geographical areas, but would love to hear kind of where the journey started for you.
I'm trained as an attorney, and I thought I would be doing M&A law or at least criminal law, but then I ended up in the nonprofit philanthropic space. My grandmother ended up with cancer, and I was looking into this is pre-Google, so I had to look and figure out where can we get resources, and that's how I ended up in the nonprofit sector. I know with my legal background, instantly was the gift planning space was really interesting for me. What are all the different tools and vehicles out there, and how can we leverage those tools and vehicles to do good in the world? During the dot-com days, I was here in the San Francisco Bay Area. 49 to 50% of the immigrants that took the companies public during the dot-com days were immigrants, right? And they were interested in not giving here in the US because now their families are here, but they are also interested in giving back home. And home could be India, China, Taiwan, it could be in Africa. And so I was helping a lot of these advisors plan the philanthropic pieces around this. So I decided to hang out in my own shingle. And I was very lucky because at that time, CAP, the Chartered Advisor and Philanthropy Program, just started, and I was able to get that designation. So being kind of the first in Asia to have that was amazing. But still struggled with, how do you get paid? How do you bring respect, right, to the profession that you love? Luckily for me, Gates and Buffett were running around in India and China trying to get folks to sign up for the Giving Pledge, and that was my marketing. So I trailed behind them. But over the years, I realized one person, very difficult to move a lot of capital into the communities. And so I decided to go back to wealth management to help families do that, and eventually to teach others how to do this work, because we need much more like advisors to understand and take it to the line where I'm really good at the portfolio management, I'm great at private banker, I'm going to help my families move to this line, but this is the line where I stop and I'm going to bring a professional in. Right. And so that's where my work is, helping them advisors figure out what that line is, and then helping build who else can be at the table.
My story has some commonalities, I think, with Dien's and some differences also. So for my undergrad, I was really into anthropology because I just really think people are fascinating. And I think the reasons why people do what they do are really fascinating. I actually wondered if I was going to go into business. At one point, I thought I might be a veterinarian, which doesn't make any sense if you just said like you're really into people. But I thought maybe I'm really into animals. Turns out I do not like seeing sick animals. So that was a good thing I did not become a veterinarian. Ultimately, I wanted to have a career that had meaning. And with a combination of being really interested with who people are and why they make the decisions that they do, combined with looking for meaning in my career, it really led me to think a little bit about the philanthropy sector and the nonprofit sector. So clearly, I got an MBA as a next step because that is a non sequitur and doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And that is right. But through working at a couple of nonprofits, it became really clear that the kind of acumen that exists in the corporate world and that the corporate world is able to pay for, the philanthropy in the nonprofit world, wasn't able to pay for. So I looked for a program that really would let me focus on nonprofits, and I found that at Boston University. So spent some time there. 4 years later, working during the day, studying at night. That degree was earned. But more importantly, the experience sitting in a nonprofit, trying to navigate the philanthropy world, trying to understand, what some of the foundations and individuals were looking for. That was the experience gained. So I left that and I went to the dark side. Is that how you would say it? Flipped over instead of trying to get the money, flipped over to the working with the groups of people who are giving the money. And quite luckily, I ended up at Geneva Global 12 years ago at this point. What was happening 12 years ago that I was really lucky to join was that the Gates Foundation was doing work to kind of build community around and with their philanthropic peers. It was when there was a lot of philanthropic collaboration among some of the really big foundations happening. And alongside that, a lot of those big foundations who really are still family foundations, because the Gates Foundation is still a family foundation, even though it's very large, right? There's family leading that. So there was a group of wealthy folks in the US, right, who are all thinking about how are we going to collaborate? Is it going to be through our foundation? Is it not going to be through our foundation? And I kind of had the chance to see that develop over the last decade and to be a part of the development of that in the last decade. And that's been really lucky. And so that's what's gotten me into philanthropy advising, just a real interest and joy in seeing how people make decisions and what's important to them, a desire to understand that and to work with folks as they're thinking about, how they are giving back, what their legacy is going to look like, what matters to them, what matters to their families, and a desire for meaning, to want to have a career where I feel like I'm contributing to a world that we want to see.
And yeah, I would also add that people ask me what type of person would make the best philanthropy advisors in the space, right? And I always say social workers. Social workers, they have empathy, they have listening skills, they're very patient. So I think even if you're not a social worker, if you have these skills, I think it would be amazing because part of our work is to listen. It's to observe and listen and really understand what the client or the donor is trying to do. So all these skills can be picked up. Now, we have a lot of private bankers, especially in Singapore, who are interested in this work and they are doing the private banking and then transitioning as well, or involving themselves a little bit more in the philanthropic advising space. Again, breaking down those barriers. Private banking attracts a certain type of individuals, right? And so now we have to train them on some of the softer skills. Whereas a lot of folks that come through the nonprofit world have those soft skills. We have to train them on the technical kind of investment skills. So different types of training. And then I would see for everyone knowing a sense of self. And I find also that philanthropy advisors who are very secure and really understand their own spirituality, not so much religion, but spirituality in their own place and understanding that has been super helpful in having these family conversations.
And I love how you frame these things, Dion. I'm having the best time listening to you also as we're having this conversation. Someone asked me recently, how do you hire folks for the experience that you give families and that you give other clients at Geneva Global? They said, do you look for an academic background? Do you look for a certain college that they come out of? First of all, I started laughing. And then I said, absolutely not. We have philanthropy advisors who were former organic farmers who were working at a bar before they joined us. No, these are real, for real. It is not about necessarily that academic background. We look for emotional intelligence. Do you have the ability to be a good listener? Do you have an ability not to try to push your agenda, but to understand the agenda of the family that you are working with and help them advance their agenda? Are you comfortable meeting someone where they are, challenging them, but not overwhelming them? This is not technical assistance. This is not coming in telling someone they have to do something a certain way and then they do it. This is philanthropy therapy in a way. Those wealth psychologists who I called out who are doing philanthropy advice, yeah, that whole field of wealth psychology exists for a reason. Philanthropy for a lot of families is really part of their heart, even as it is maybe part of their business also. So you can't just speak to the analytics of it.
No, I love that, Kasey, because we always talk about it's the art and a science to this work, right? And the heart and the mind. No, you're right. There's certain things. Again, it's not about the technical. There are lots of specialists out there that can help you with the technical pieces, but spending the time with your donors and your clients and really trying to figure out what it is. And sometimes we have to be diagnosticians, right? It's almost like a general practice doctor. You go there and say, and the patient will like, I have this problem. And the doctor's like, no, you don't have that problem. It looks like you have that problem, but here's really your problem. And so we have to play this diagnostician so that we can help them unpack what it is that they would like to do and then help guide them on this journey, right? And take them through it. And that's hard work. And in a lot of spaces, especially in like certain Asian countries, the way we've trained our students and our learners, they're not supposed to think that way. They're supposed to memorize things and be able to regurgitate it. We have to figure out how to break this cycle a little bit to get them to actually feel, talk, and talk about what brings you joy and how do you actually help families flourish in this space.
And the work that I've seen working in the United Arab Emirates or the UAE, again, highly relationship based. So in the US, we might see a patriarch of a family, and then we might see some kids. We're working with a family like this right now, right? They're all quite independent and they're all comfortable with that. In fact, they're so independent that they've lost a track a little bit of what each other is doing. And part of what they need their philanthropy advisor to do is just bring us together a little bit so that we can all see what each other is doing. We can see like how all of our work connects. That might be quite different. For example, in the UAE and thinking about the family structure, you might not have that same level of independence, with the kids, right? You might be looking at philanthropy really as a family legacy versus an individual legacy, or the individual legacy that's connected to a broader family legacy. But then again, you find that in the US too. So every
Yeah,
family is unique.
that reminds me of like when privacy is such a huge issue for families as well. When I was
Yes.
starting out, and I was living here in the Bay Area and had families in Singapore and Hong Kong, I was thinking I should move there. I should be closer to my clients. One of the gentlemen said to me, Deanne, if you move here, I'm going to fire you. And it's because he liked it. Like, you stay where you are. I like the privacy. I don't want everyone to know you're my philanthropy advisor. And I don't want you starting your business here so that now everyone is your client. And so there is this privacy. And if you have not worked with ultra high net worth families or families who are very, very private, you need to learn that kind of skill set as well, right?
I agree with that entirely. And to take it beyond that, just the privacy of no, 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 I don't want you physically here. Like this is better for me as it is. But even like how public a family wants to be with their philanthropy. Do they want to be entirely anonymous? This is not uncommon for families to be like, no, no, no. If we were to get the spotlight for this work we were doing, that would be the absolute antithesis of what we want to accomplish here. We don't want folks to know what we're doing. And in fact, if they did, it would reflect badly on us.
And taking that one step further for the culture piece, a lot of families in Asia actually don't want that to be in the limelight, right? They're doing this work because it's the right thing to do, not because they want their name splashed everywhere or people to recognize them. So again, I call it the cultural dexterity kind of work is as your philanthropy advisor, you need to understand the region, the locality, the people you're working with, what is important to them. Especially in this space, you have to learn how to work maybe in the US, in Canada, and Africa, because families are global as well. And families are growing, right? Intermarriages. And so one family might have 5 or 6 different generations, but they might also have different kind of identities. And so learning how to navigate that is really important.
A final takeaway that I have is I never assume anything about a family. You just never know what a family is like until you
Mm.
spend some time with them.
And that precisely matters because of the relational and emotional aspects of this advising, right? It's not just the technical, as you both agreed and eloquently explained. I think also implicit in what you have been describing, and thank you for giving so much color and texture to who a philanthropy advisor is and what she or he does. And I think implicit here is the trends that you see on the practice side of this, and also the trends in the families that are served by these or supported by these philanthropy advisors. If you can speak a little bit more about these trends that you see, and we could go global, but at the same time, giving it a particular Asian angle.
We caught out a couple of trends in this white paper. One of them is the trend of philanthropy advisors serving people with particular identities, and specifically BIPOC identities and LGBTQ IA plus identities. And I'll pass it to Dien because she did some great research last year that talked a little bit about some of the correlation between donors with these identities and the kinds of philanthropy advisors that they work with.
It's in, and this applies mostly in the US because we've not done enough research outside the US. What we're seeing is in the philanthropic advising space, there's a huge shift for a lot of BIPOC folks into philanthropic advising. In fact, a third of our 258 respondents identified as BIPOC. Is Black, Indigenous, and people of color, right? And then there's also this really rising interest, need for the LGBTQA community, because a lot of the current philanthropy advisors are not serving the families that are interested in supporting a lot of these issues. So, for example, I was working with this wealth management firm in Boston, and the gentleman called me and said, Dien, I have 2 weeks to come up with a whole team that is BIPOC advisors. If I don't come up with this team, I'm going to lose this $50 million prospect. And the reason is the two prospects are in their late 30s. Their gaming company just sold. They want a BIPOC team. And they told the wealth advisors, and he's a white gentleman, Caucasian, and said, okay to keep you, but the rest of the team, the CPA, the philanthropy advisor, the attorney, all those have to be BIPOC. And so the problem then is he was looking around trying to figure out where can I find a philanthropy advisor that can work at this level, right? Knowing the complexities of selling a company and planning for that and different vehicles that are involved and then doing a strategy. So this is, for me, very interesting to see families that are demanding this, but the market has not created or found enough advisors trained in this space. So again, we have a market gap.
And just to add to that, Dan, the research that you did in 2024 really said that families who are LGBTQIA plus tend to work with LGBTQIA plus advisors. So there's a really strong correlation in addition to what you just mentioned about BIPOC families, like looking for BIPOC philanthropy advisors. At least in the US, people with certain identities reaching out and looking for others who share that identity and the experience of that identity in order to build a giving experience that is compelling and rich.
In case we're going to run into the same situation in Asia, because a lot of the I would say the next gen or the inheritors or the intergen studied overseas. Their thinking is a little bit different. They're much more holistic, much more global. And then when they come back home, their giving is going to look very different. So now the problem is they're looking for a philanthropy advisor, say in Hong Kong and Indonesia, the Philippines. Can they find a philanthropic advisor that also can help them and support them through this global kind of giving process, right? I would say, in Asia, if you look at China, India, South Korea, Vietnam, a lot of these countries, families made their wealth, right? A little bit after World War II. We are going to have this great wealth transfer that's going to happen. It's not just in the US, it is going to happen in Asia. In the US, we have generations and years of history of creating family offices. So there is structure in place. There's formal structures in place. There's tools, there's regulations. And so you could find an attorney or a whole team to create a family office, including embedding a philanthropy advisor in that family office or partnered. In Asia, we don't have those structures in place. Family offices are a relatively new concept in Asia. And so in Singapore and Hong Kong are doing an amazing job trying to get everyone up to speed. Unfortunately, a lot of these families in Asia, and they're men, they're mostly men, they're 80s and 90s. They have to pass that wealth on to the next generation. The problem is there's really no experience in this. There's never been, like their fathers or grandfathers have never formally transferred wealth in this fashion. So we are going to have, to me, a big issue in Asia. This is going to happen in the next 10 years. So not only do we have to train our private bankers and our attorneys to do this work, we have to train the philanthropic advisors. So we need more philanthropy advisors in Asia than ever, and we need to train them how to speak in this multi-generational kind of language as well. Huge opportunity, though.
First of all, if I were a bank listening to this podcast, one thing I would think to myself is, do I have the philanthropy advisors on staff that is going to meet the needs of families right now? Do I have philanthropy advisors who are going to be able to speak to or engage with different types of families based on their lived experience? Have I staffed this correctly? In the US, if I were a family office, I would be thinking, do I have the right people covering the right identities in this family office? Speaking again to the Asia context, which Dien, you just laid out so brilliantly as you lay out everything so brilliantly, it might be looking at different identities, but it also might be looking at different experiences. Do I have folks on staff who are going to be able to connect with next gen, who are going to be the recipients of and the inheritors of this money? Or have I staffed my organization really to deal with their fathers or the patriarchs of the family?
And there's new wealth. There's lots of new wealth and new young wealth, right? Lots of entrepreneurs in Asia that are building, but unlike their predecessors where they build and then they give, a lot of them are interested in building and giving at the same time. So again, the dexterity that's needed, right, to work in this space is so important. So I would say, I follow James Hughes, one of the amazing family office and attorneys and advisors, and he talks about these three things. We need to help families successfully integrate wealth. We need to help families flourish. And finally, he says, if we can help families flourish, then those are the building blocks of a flourishing society. And so Asia, a lot of the countries in Asia and China and Hong Kong and like all these places have such a huge opportunity to really build and grow communities of wealth right now.
As we both said, the truth of the matter is, this is being developed right now. There's not a huge amount of standardization. There's not industry standards in terms of the words that you must use to describe certain things. Even the competencies, which Dien has just taken care of, right? But that's just a first step. There's so much more that needs to be happening. So it's a fun time to be part of this beautiful mess, because we're all in the process of helping shape what we really want to see philanthropy advising to look like in the future. We're all in the process of helping define what it is becoming.
And Kasey, I can't wait one day to somebody, a little girl comes up to me and says, when I grow up, I want to be a philanthropy advisor. Okay.
It would be the best.
This is a great segue, and already you're doing it. Would love to hear from you both a call to action to aspiring philanthropy advisors, as well as philanthropists out there who are about to take their first step into giving or looking to expand their giving even.
I have some ideas on what I would love to see happen. The first thing I would love to see is philanthropy advisors get an understanding of where other philanthropy advisors are working and doing this work. If you are working at a bank, that's kind of your silo. That is what you are used to. Go out and see where other folks are giving this philanthropy advice and what that philanthropy advice looks like. Dien has the most incredible network, has built a career around meeting other philanthropy advisors, of doing this work. Folks who don't have that kind of network yet need to invest the time in building it. I wish that donors would see the value of putting money into the philanthropy advising sector, knowing that philanthropy advisors are really who help families move incredible amounts of money every single year, and really seeing, oh, this is a need. The more I can invest in philanthropy advisors and into professionalizing this work, the better the chance I have of helping that wealth transfer not just stay within families, but to be shared with communities around the world through philanthropy. The second thing that I would really like to see as a call to action is for people not to be shy to look at, the philanthropy advising ecosystem in whatever country you are living in and doing work in, and write your own white paper. This white paper was looking at the US, but what does it look like in Singapore? AVPN, I'm going to call you out. Maybe you want to write something about what philanthropy advising looks like in Singapore and the ecosystem. What does this look like in Colombia? What does this look like in the UAE? We are going to have a website where we are going to be collating and sharing this research. So the more groups that write about what the philanthropy advisor ecosystem looks like in different countries and geographies, we will have a central place to collect all that research and to make sure that it is available to everyone.
Thank you, Kasey. I would say, Neil, if you're really interested in being a philanthropic advisor, go to our website and download our philanthropic advising competency model. Inside that model, you'll find 13 competencies, and within each 13 competencies, there's certain objectives. Take the test, 1 through 5, right? Just go down that list. What do you know? What are you comfortable with? What do you need to learn more of? And knowing that you're not going to learn everything, you cannot master all these different objectives, but just understand that this is a lifelong learning process. And then the other thing I would encourage folks is take a look at the report, because we documented 9 different components of modern philanthropic planning. Take a look at those 9 modern components. Use that to basically build your business, right? If you are working with a family, take these 9 components. We already gave you the business plan here. Again, go and figure out what you are really comfortable with, what you need to learn more. And where you need to learn more, there are now organizations that, like Daylight, WMI, AVPN, there are resources out there to supplement your knowledge. And I would say for the donor, the philanthropist that's listening, you're not alone. You don't need to be alone to do this work. There's so many helpful, smart, intelligent people, experts in this space. And I love using this word because back in the 1990s, we used a lot. You should take advantage of their expertise so that you could leapfrog in this space, right? Learn as much as you can from them and really build out what you would like to do. And when you're doing this work, have a philanthropy advisor or any advisor walk alongside you. It's always good just to check and see the work I'm doing, am I creating unintended consequences as well for the society, in addition to doing good? So I think we just have to be very, very mindful when we do this work. Times change, environments change, politics change, but I think constantly checking yourself and say, is this really the best I can do at this time? But can I also do better, right? And who else can I do better with? So I just encourage you to ask yourself those questions. Again, don't need to be alone in this space.
If you are in a position of wealth, seek out a philanthropy advisor, seek out that expert help. You would do that if you were not a plumber and had a plumbing issue. Reach out to that philanthropy advisor who can help you with your philanthropy and make it what you really want. And I would just add to that, don't be satisfied with a philanthropy advisor who always tells you yes. Don't be satisfied with someone who doesn't challenge you. On the other hand, don't be satisfied with someone who is going to push you in a direction that you really know this is just not the right direction for me. Look for someone who you can connect with. Look for someone who you can have a good, rich, deep conversation with, and someone who is not afraid of collaboration. Someone who will bring in other people for you to meet. Someone who can work with your existing advisors, whether they're your tax advisors, whether they're your wealth advisors, whether you have another philanthropy advisor in a particular area, but you're looking maybe to do something outside of that area. Maybe you have someone you work with on education, but maybe you're interested in something else, right? Look for someone who is not afraid to join that group and have those conversations.
Neil, in closing, I would encourage funders, philanthropists, donors, even philanthropy advisors, we need to invest in building infrastructure for our work. So support groups like AVPN, support local organizations that are trying to build the local ecosystem of like a really flourishing nonprofit sector. We need that. You cannot do good philanthropy work without a really good solid foundation in this space. So big pitch, I just want to say, if you're listening, definitely support AVPN's work.
Dien Yuen, CEO of Daylight, Kasey Oliver, Managing Director, Geneva Global. It's been a great start for my day listening to the two of you, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate the same, and would encourage everybody to have a look at this research that's about to be published by Geneva Global. The Constellation of Philanthropy Advisors will sure to include a link alongside this podcast, as well as Dien Yuen's research, which you can easily download from her website, but we'll also provide a link. Lastly, we hope to see all of you at the AVPN Global Conference 2025 in Hong Kong next month, 9th to 11th September. Thank you, everybody. Money Meets Mission is a podcast brought to you by AVPN Academy, where we learn from leaders, experts, and thought leaders to help us amplify our impact as social investment practitioners. AVPN Academy is the learning arm of AVPN, which provides learning experiences that strengthen the social investment community in Asia, for Asia, through practitioner-led and peer-to-peer sharing of knowledge and wisdom. For more information, visit academy.avpn.asia.